think one of the important things is I'm not from Westport, so if I make any mistakes in pronunciation or geography, forgive me. But as Jenny said, my area of interest is whaling in New England, and I search for journals and bits and pieces in Scrimshaw everywhere I can, from flea markets to antique auctions. And one of the places that I found a very important piece recently in my life, one I'm going to speak about tonight, is an online auction. And the online auction described what is a journal that included whaling, and it was from Westport. It didn't even say which Westport, whether it was Connecticut or Massachusetts. And eventually, I was able to purchase it, and I was really delighted to find what the story entailed. And it wasn't just a whaling journal, although that was my area of interest. It was a 5-year journal written by a Westport farmer from 1833 to 1838. And he reported pretty much everything he did in his life in little bits and pieces, including an entry every single day for just about 5 years. And it normally started with the weather, the date, then the weather, and then things that he did. Everything from the mundane chores of working with the cows and planting corn and harvesting, to his social life. When he started writing the journal, he was 23 years old, just about to be 24. And the reasons he wrote the journal, as I've read it numerous times, I believe was he's getting to be 24 years old, he's not married, he lives with his parents, he's an only child, he's being worked like a slave, and is getting paid very little. And I think he's trying to reflect on his life to see how much fun is he actually having, what's he doing, and at the end of his first year he does a tally. He does an accounting sheet, actually. And the accounting sheet includes 7 months, and it's 7 months of what he spent and what he earned. And I can tell you, it's a lot like some of our governments. He spent a lot more than he earned. So as I mentioned, the journal starts in June of 1833, and it covers a lot of different things. I'm going to read a few excerpts just to set the tone for the kinds of things that were in it. July 6th. This morning, Pa presented me a watch, the first one I ever owned. So he's just about 24 years old, never had a watch. August 12th. Wagon mired in the mud, one wheel up to the hub. Got Cobb, PT, and RL to help me out. Devoted the rest of the day to reading. And this is kind of important because he's a Westport farmer. He's gotten his education probably in a schoolhouse just less than a quarter of a mile from his house. And he spends a lot of time, as the journal reads, purchasing books, reading them, and he's very inquisitive. Also, I might add that the journal is written very clearly. It has about 60,000 words crammed into 82 pages of text. So doing a rough count, it's 700 to 800 words per page, written in microtype. If you were to probably refer to it as print type, it would be 10-point type. And he fills every inch of the page. There's no such thing as a margin or a white space. Thursday, August 22nd, won a cranberry, lost my knife on the bog. September 9th, he reports going menhaden fishing. He reports doing all sorts of hunting and fishing, going out to the Elizabeth Islands. But in this particular case, menhaden fishing caught 226 barrels. He later says, spread the fish on the fields. So you get the fish back, and this is obviously a fertilizer fish, but his job is to now bring them back and spread them out on the fields. Went to New Bedford, bought 12 yards of twilling, $1.56, and a pair of square-toed shoes, first I ever had. September 21st, went over to Dr. Handy's and got some medicine for my throat. I think that's kind of interesting. You'll see where he lives shortly, but just down the road is Dr. Handy, and he's going over to get some medicine. A party of girls and boys went to Gooseberry Neck, a gull's egging. So I guess they gathered gull eggs and made omelets. Sunday, September 20th, 9 ladies and 9 gentlemen were baptized down by Tripp's Wharf, Howard Tripp, minister. There are a lot of talk about religious meetings, funerals. October 2nd, this evening, went a quilting to S. Cornell's, left at 11 o'clock. I'm sure he starts his day at dawn, and he's out doing chores, and probably works all day with a break for lunch. But every night, with the rest of the young people, the teenagers and 20-year-olds, they go over to somebody's house and chat, have cider. Kind of the beginning of clubbing. It's dating. It's meeting who's going to be your wife or husband. Tabitha Gifford, wife of Warren Gifford, departed this life 12 o'clock this evening. A much respected member and speaker in the Society of Friends, age 56. On October 5th, went to Tabitha Gifford's funeral. A very large collection of people, plus 99 carriages. Now, I don't know about Westport in 1833, but that seems like it's all the carriages in town. So this had to be a very important person and a very important funeral. Again, young folks here, that would be at his house, they cleared out at 10 o'clock. So he works all day, gets up at 5, and it's usually 9:30 to 11 o'clock at night by the time they get home from the young people's outings. That's kind of a full day. November 18th, moderate winds. This day went oystering, caught 3 1/4 bushels. Pa killed beef, 571 pounds. So this is a working and subsistence farm. Saturday, December 5th, went to Clayville, bought, and this is the title, A Geographical View of the World. So he's got a little more interest than just Westport in the backyard. Let me get the hang of this. So who is Frederick Allen? Frederick Allen is the son of Major and Molly Allen. This is an interesting entry that Jenny found in one of the Handy journals, Dr. Handy's journals. If you, I'm not sure you can read it, but what it says in here is July 27th, 1809, delivered his wife, and that's under the account of Major Allen. So this is announcing the birth of Frederick Allen, which, by the way, if you check his tombstone date, it's 1 day later. So this is probably the right date, although maybe the doctor had the wrong date. And this is where they lived, at the very top of Horseneck Road. The bridge, the Hicks Bridge being right about over here, and the Cadnan's Neck right about over here. This picture of the house is one that I got from the website of the Buzzards Bay Brewing Company. I'm not sure where they got it, and I haven't talked to them, but it looks to be an image from maybe the turn of the last century, just as a guess. But that is a side view of the house.
What was the street number, road number of Horseneck? Do you know which side it was on?
If you're going south, it's where the brewing company is. It's on the left and down maybe a quarter of a mile from the top. So it's maybe the third driveway, fourth driveway, and it's a long shell drive.
I think the house will be relocated to a resident in Westport.
Aha. We'll find out for sure. Maybe this is a different story. Okay. Next. Major Allen, Frederick's father, besides working on the farm, also had to, in order to earn money and get some cash to buy things, he worked on the Hicks Bridge. Now, I don't know if this is during a rebuild of the bridge or just a repair, but one day while he was working on it, this is a postcard that I located, one of the pieces of granite, maybe one of the ones that you see over here, fell onto his leg and he was out of commission for a couple of weeks because of the damage done. Yeah. An entry that Frederick made in his journal was he was building a boathouse on the river, and he decided to find out how far he had to walk every time he walked from his house to the boathouse. So he counted the paces. Well, doing some rough calculations, I came to about 3/4 of a mile if you use 32 inches per pace. And if you can see here, this is Horse Neck, this is the drive going in, the house would have been right about here. So in somewhere right along here is where he would have built his boathouse. And he talks about taking the scow, and this is somebody else's scow that they all borrowed or rented from the bridge, and took 1,000 shingles and 229 feet of boards for the boathouse at $5.75. So he's building his boathouse on the river. A little earlier, he talked about the purchase of a boat for nearly $20, which is a lot of money, but he gave no description of what the boat was. He did the building out, he made the sales, so he took it from there. So this is a boathouse for his boat that he used to go out to the Elizabeth Islands, to go hunting, to go on outings, to go fishing, and that's how he got around on the water. And this was nothing to do with the farm, nothing to do with his father, except obviously the fertilizer and some other things. And that's a postcard of a really early photo image looking from the Horseneck Road side of the Cadman's Cove across to Cadman's Neck. And you can kind of vaguely, it's a little bit faded, but you can see some boats, you see a piece of a dock, so there's some moorings. And my guess is this is a little further up, it seems to be closing up, so maybe he's down a little further south. Kind of a guess, but it certainly is, this is probably more like 1900, so 70 years earlier. I doubt it changed too much, though. One thing I found is there wasn't much to do in the way of entertainment, but the circus came to town, and this is the town of New Bedford. And he was really enamored with the circus. I mean, this was a big kid, 24 years old, but he really had a great time. And what he said is he went to see the Caravan of Animals, the museum, and he enjoyed myself very well. Spent $1.20. That's a ton of money. And he had a really good time and talked about it in a number of entries after that. I mentioned that this is the page for the last day of 1833, when he did his tally for how he did for the year. I now sum up my expenditures from the 1st of last June, 1833, to this date. Sundries of $10.15, tobacco, 54 cents, boathouse, $11.32, boat, $23.50. Amount of expenditures, $45.51. Now we get to the good part. Received, for what I have worked off on the farm and for what I have sold, $18.85. Thus ends the year of our Lord, 1833. Not a good year, not a good financial year. But I think this adds up to his thinking as time goes on, working on the farm and doing these 7-day-a-week workload for his father with no siblings to help. Next. Major Allen's new house. Two of the important parts of the journal are the building of a house and the going on a whaling voyage. Now, this house is built for his father. It's his father's house, not his. He's a worker. And he assists in the building of the house, but he does everything else that you do in the way of farming, from taking care of all of the different varieties of farm animals, to all the different crops, to the picking, the harvesting, cutting of wood for the fireplaces, everything that you possibly do, and along with it, a side job of building a new house for his father. And the house was begun on February 4th, 1835, according to the journal, and John Allen begins the construction. John Allen is the brother of Major Allen, uncle of Frederick Allen, and he lives with the extended family. And they say that it's to replace the old house. Doing some math, I got to the number of 1709. I'm going to read a number of excerpts having to do with the building of the house. February 26th. This afternoon I was busy beating chips off timber, and Pa was hewing on another stick when the axe flew out of my hands and took Pa across his left leg and cut him a woeful gash. Now, I didn't have a chance to check the Handy journal, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was a visit to Dr. Handy on that particular day. Now we go to Friday, March 20th, and by the way, we're in 1835 now. I've kind of skipped a little of some of the same routine. This AM, 7 hands of us pulled down the house which had been built 126 years, as near as I can ascertain by tradition. That's how I got to 1709. So the old house was torn down, and one of the reasons they tore it down is so that they could use some of the timbers from that house to build the new house. A lot of recycling going on. Thursday, March 26th, dug cellar till 10 o'clock, then went to the point, brought up a scow load of brick and lime, and he mentions a number of people, including H. Perot, P-E-R-O. This is a name that is going to come up later that's an important one. It's his best friend. I'm sure they hired a lot of neighbors and probably paid them a fee, and that's what some people, that's how some people earned a living, and I think Henry Perot is one of those. Had a hard old time of it, arrived home at 6 o'clock. March 27th, drawed brick and lime mid-afternoon. Then he mentioned something that I think has to do with the economy. We're almost entering a recession in the late 30s into the early 40s. And this being 35, what he says is, it's been rather uncommon in the area this March in buying and selling of farms. No less than 6 have been sold in the compass of 5 miles from here. And all the folks that bought and sold are my acquaintances. I think it's hard times. I think what's going on in town is not a good thing. Wednesday, April 16th. This is one of the sadder entries. My faithful old dog, Bessie, kicked the bucket this day, 8 1/4 years old. Well, we're 2 years into the journal, and he's never mentioned that he had a dog, but it's gone. Wednesday, April 22nd. Pa, H. Perot, and me took trip scow, went to Horseneck Point at the harbor, and took a load of sand. Arrived home at DW's, and he very often will use initials. As you read the journal, you can sometimes figure out who it is, because sometime later on he mentions David Wing. So it's David Wing's scow that they borrow, and David Wing's shore. He arrived home at 4 1/2 o'clock, and then drove home 2 loads. They're working in the moonlight. This is a big project, and I don't think he needs that watch that he got. Attended the Mason until 9 o'clock this morning when Ezra Lee, who was the Mason, and I traced him to Dartmouth in an old directory, topped out the third and last stack of chimneys, which took 12,000 bricks and 4.5 casks of lime, and the mason 18 1/4 days. Probably could take that and multiply it a few times as far as today's masons. June 26th, began to laugh. Hammered a piece of my thumb off. Then went to the point and brought up 10,000 laths to David Wayne's shore. This is where he mentions the Wayne. Dug up docks, whipped a lot of hair to mix with plaster, which made me sick the rest of the day. That was kind of probably a pretty nasty thing as plaster starts to heat up, you're not enhancing the smell in your room. Pa moved into his house July 28th, 1835, although it's not finished yet. Then he gets permission from his father to have his bedroom, and his bedroom is upstairs in the garret, but he has to build it himself, so he has to build it out. And what he says is he cleaned out the well, then he lathed some in his room and finished lathing it on August 7th. Next. So I decided after this I had to go and look for the house. So having an address, and I believe it was like 108 or something like that, the current number. I found where I thought it was, and it's a long road. It should be down and on the left. But when I arrived at the destination, it was just an empty lot. The house was not there. But there was the pub at the Buzzards Bay Brewing Company. And I went in, and there was a bartender there, and bartenders often have all the answers. So I asked him if there had been an old house there, and he said yes, but it was taken down. And I just thought, oh no, you know. He said, and he said it wasn't that long ago, so I thought, well, I missed it. He said, but it wasn't destroyed, it was actually taken down, disassembled, and moved. So the answer becomes, where did it go? And in doing some research, I found that, and I'm not sure which route it took, we can find this out though. So it started over here on Horseneck, probably went over the bridge, and then down either 88 or Main Road, and wound up here about 5 miles away. Now, you probably know more about the house than I did. I had none of the history. So when I started to dig into the history, I found that the house was really very nearly lost and had been used in a movie with some pyrotechnics, and with a little bit of wind, it probably would have been burned to the ground. But it wasn't. And thanks to Dora and Trip Milliken, who are here tonight, they decided that they would save the house, and thereby the reason that it was packaged up and moved where it was to their property. Next. At the time I took this slide, it was nearing completion. The exterior was done. And there's Dora holding up a piece of a board from behind one of the fireplaces. I believe this is in the dining room. And the interesting about it is, next slide. What it says is the date of, and I can't read it and I don't have it in my note, May 17th, 1835, fair and sunny, and signed F. Allen. He actually wrote this, put it up, then they put the lath and plaster over it, and fortunately in the destruction or in the moving, somebody happened to notice this little bit of pencil scrawl that was on it. I was able to compare the date entry in the journal. It's exactly the same, the weather was the same, his description was the same, the penmanship was the same, and the same F and the same Allen. So he indeed wrote it in hopes that sometime, somewhere, somebody might find it. And guess what? We did. And as far as the plan for the moving and restoration, if you don't know about it, every board was numbered. Every piece was put back in as much of the same place as possible. Fortunately, not a lot of renovation had been done in the house over the years. Mostly all of the interior doors existed with all the hardware. Next. The fireplace mantles for 4 of the fireplaces existed and were moved in. All the floorboards were put in the same sequence as they were when it was initially built. The stairway that you see on the right was moved in one piece and reinstalled. Next. This is the new mason at work, and by the way, I was able to go there while the current masons were reinstalling the fireplaces. And I was able to read to them some of the information about 12,000 bricks and how much sand, and I could see them kind of calculating and trying to imagine how this was done in 1835. What you see on your right is the kitchen fireplace and oven. This didn't exist. This has been taken out, but there was a ghost on the wall, and using the style that would have been built at the time and the size by using the dimensions that were left by just the shadow where the old one was, it was restored using some of the brick from the chimneys that wasn't used and rebuilt, because what you can't see is some fire brick has been replaced. Next. And this is the garret bedroom, from what you can see just looking into this doorway, that our star Frederick Allen lived in. So it's, I can tell you, not very big. It's with a pitch on both sides, enough to put a small half-size bed and a little closet on one side, and not much else than that. So that was his accommodations while living with his parents. Next. This is an interesting entry because the reason I think that the book may exist, and I can tell you that it was bought initially because of the drawing on the cover. And it was bought by a very famous folk art dealer in Stonington, Connecticut, Marguerite Reardon. And she purchased it approximately 20 years ago. And the sole reason was kind of frameable art, not content, which is kind of interesting how one person's treasure is the cover and the other is the content. Next. So I mentioned Henry Perot before. The Perots are fairly well known to many of you who are interested in the history of Westport. And he and his mother were brought up by Charlotta White. And he was born in approximately 1816, so he would have been 7 years younger than Frederick Allen, but as I say, they were good buddies. They went hunting, they went fishing, they worked together. They shot the mark. And from what I understand, shooting a mark is target shooting at a paper target of some sort. Frederick beat poor Henry every single time that I was able to read, so he was a better shot. But there's a lot of detail, a lot more to learn about some of these relationships. We know that, and I don't have my notes on the name of the family he lived with, but directly across the river from where the Allens lived was a family that he was brought up with later in life. And I wonder if that's where he lived, because I have no record of where he lived at the time. But it seems like multiple times a week he's speaking about Henry Perot. So I assume he lived nearby, maybe just on the other side of the river, maybe the total of a mile, mile and a half, 2 miles walk or horse ride. Well, here we go again. We know that that Frederick really loves the circus, and this is unbelievable, but he hears that the menagerie is coming to Westport Point, and he tells his father and his mother that he's going to take part of the day off and he's going to the circus, and guess what they say? You can't go. He's now 26 years old, and he can't take a day off to go to the circus that he dearly loves. Well, he grouses about this for a number of days. He doesn't go, he does his chores, but you know that the end is near for the farm. So here it is now, January 1837, and he reports doing some scrimshanting. Well, he's never gone on a whaling voyage, so where did he get a tooth, or what does he do? It doesn't have to be a tooth, it could be he built a box, he made a swift, he did something, but he mentions doing it. And I think the interesting thing is he makes an entry shortly after this, on February 7th. Cousin A. Allen made me a visit, who has just returned from whaling. So I think what he's thinking is, I don't earn a lot of money, I can't go to the circus, I'm being worked to death. Maybe I should try whaling. So I think here's where he starts to think about it. He's looking for a new career to make some money and show Pa that he's not going to just keep working in the fields. Next. Now, I say it might have looked like this. I happen to have a plain tooth, and a friend of mine, Ryan Cooper, is a scrimshaw artist, and I thought, well, I'm not going to be keeping this journal forever, but I want a little memento, so I had to do the same horse onto a tooth. And this is just for my own personal collection. Next. So what he does, Monday, February 20th, he went to the head of the river to H.D. Howland's, deceased, auction, and bought a Bowditch Navigator for $1.05. Next, Tuesday, February 21st, studied my Navigator that I bought yesterday. Tuesday, March 14th, went to the point and had some talk about going a-whaling. We're getting close now. March 21st, 1837, went to the point and shipped. That means signed up, he didn't leave yet. Go a-whaling on the brig Mexico for every 65th barrel. Now, I've never heard it stated that way. I don't know if he's getting 1/65th. I don't know what but I'm assuming that that's what it is, after the owners take expenses and outfitting. But the voyage that he signs up for is merely a one-year voyage. And planning ahead as he does and being frugal, he actually rented his boathouse out for 1 year. So the voyage better last about a year, because when he comes back, he's going to want it. He mentions also what you have to do, getting seaman's protection papers. So he actually went to New Bedford, got his papers. He's ready and raring to go. Next. And although I didn't find the protection papers in the New Bedford Whaling Museum or the New Bedford Public Library, they did have a ledger which listed him, Frederick Allen, age 27, and they give it a physical description. Height, 6'2½". Well, this is huge in that day. When all of the other people on this voyage are, you know, between 5'2" and 5'9", probably. It made me think back to the pace. It's probably not as long a distance for him from the house to the That's probably, he has a 38-inch stride, so it's really more like a half a mile. But beyond that, I also thought, and I went back and measured at the house to find the distance between the top of the doorway in his garret bedroom and the floorboards. And it was barely 6'2½". So that would mean that if he had shoes on, he probably had to duck every time he went in and out.
Just find that really odd that somebody would have their son in the attic, you know?
Well, he did too. I can tell you that the house, you know, we'll talk about the residents of the house shortly. And it wasn't that big a house, in number of bedrooms, with his father and mother and uncle and...
Uncle gets a bedroom, he doesn't.
As he's going to whaling. But yeah, that was the case. Next. And this is the crew list. I know you can't see it from there, but it's a short crew list because it's a brig. They wouldn't need quite as many, but they would be going over to the Azores to fill the crew out. And some of the people that are in here show up a number of times, including the cook and one of his other mates. Next. So the whaling voyage begins on April 21st, 1837. And they took their first whale in a little over 2 weeks. So again, they're working only the Atlantic. They're going for sperm whales. The market is there. Right whales, regular whale oil is down, so the owners are going to go for a short voyage. It won't cost them that much to fit out the ship, and they'll just work the Atlantic and do the best they can. Next. I'll read a few excerpts from his whaling voyage. On May 8th, just a couple of weeks out, they get the whale. Busy cutting in whale. And this is where you get a little more than just the average writing of words down and describing exactly what's there. The sharks as thick as flies around Menhaden in August. Hundreds and hundreds of them. Well, he would know this after spreading them on the field. But just to use that and do that, use that as a description by how many sharks, and he's got to be surprised. He's a farm boy. He's a green hand, but he's 27 years old, so he's not like the 17-year-olds that are right next to him. Friday, June 6th. Now they're barely out a month and a half, and they get a tremendous gale and tremendous seas. About 1 o'clock this morning, the larboard watch on deck, the brig rolled so deep she carried away the second waste boat. It's a whaleboat. With all of her craft, and this is the bad part, a new pair of duck trousers for me. I had washed and put into her to dry, all went in a moment. He lost his pair of pants. He's not so worried about the company's whaleboat, but remember, he's practical. June 28th, sold our cook, William Pratt. William was on that list, the original crew list, a book for 38 cents. The next person who was also on the crew list was Frederick Head. And he said, sold Frederick Head my practical navigator for $3. Is to pay me when the voyage is up. Well, that's kind of interesting. If you remember back, he bought that book at auction for $1.05. He made a handsome profit on his crewmate. Typically, scrimshaw that they do is what they know. So there are a lot of whaling scenes. Of course, they also did women. Very often they would do them not from memory, but, and this being a short voyage, it's a little different, but they would do them by tracing Harper's or existing newspapers and magazines. And it's what's called a method of pinprick transfer. So you would actually cut it out of a newspaper, cut an illustration, moisten it, put it on a tooth, trace it with a sailmaker's needle or your knife point, and that way you'd have an outline. So you could, these not being talented artists, although Frederick was pretty good at drawing a horse. But next. He also mentions speaking to William Cuffey on another whaling vessel called the Rising Sun, the Rising States. And this was a whaling voyage, the son of Paul Cuffey, and it was an all-black crew. Well, they weren't doing very well. They had very little oil. But by December, there was some sort of a plague, and a number of people, a number of the crew died, including Cuffey and the first mate. So this, they'd met them earlier, but that was certainly a lot of research to look into. As I mentioned, most of the vessels that they see, they mention, any of that they spoke to or gammed with, they would also give more details, and there's a lot of that in the journal. Next. This is, as I was saying, there were 4 deaths on that voyage. Next. This is another interesting thing, being studying scrimshaw. You never find an example of somebody doing scrimshaw before they go on a voyage. You also don't find examples of people doing scrimshaw to sell. You did it to bring home to your wife, your girlfriend, your mother. You did it for tools that you were going to use. But in this case, Captain Gideon Davis actually made this, and at least one other one mentioned, a spool stand. And Frederick bought the spool stand from him. And he doesn't say exactly what he spent for it, but he said he turned toward him payment of $3 due from Frederick Head. So when he sold the book, he was owed $3. So as he's negotiating his deal, and there's a lot of negotiating and swapping and trading that goes on, both on board and on land. And with his captain owing him another $1 when the voyage is up. Then he says that in total, the ivory stand, by way of trade, cost him $2.05. So somehow he did some math and found out that in his swaps, he got this stand. And it's my opinion that he probably got it for his wife-to-be, and this is part of his plan, is to earn some money, and as soon as he gets back, he's planning to marry. And this is probably a gift for her. Next. And my speculation is, I have no idea what it looked like. He talks about a lot of different scrimshaw, but this is what a spool stand could look like. Next. Everybody is doing scrimshaw. I mean, they've been very lucky. They've had gotten quite a few whales, which means quite a few sperm whale teeth. And on a longer voyage, they wait until you're on your way home. But this being a short voyage, the captain said, go ahead and do scrimshaw. I guess he kind of had to since he was, although I'm not sure the rules work the same for the captain. But he got in a row with the cook, the other fellow that Frederick sold the book to. And the big point was no doing of scrimshaw on deck. When you're on deck, you're watching for whales. This is all about business, and you can't be looking down. It's sort of like texting while you're driving. You can't be looking down doing work and you're going to see whales. So he put a taboo, or as Frederick said, tarboo, on scrimshanding for a while, and that was a little bit of punishment for the crew that you have to get serious here. It's not playtime. In rough calculation, in trying to figure the going rate for gallons of sperm whale oil and what their take was and what the normal rate of fitting out a ship and other costs, my guess is that he made $125 for his 1 year of whaling on this voyage, which is a lot better than the $20 he made in half a year back in '33. And perhaps this is the nest egg that he needs to go back home to get married. This is where the journal ends. The ship arrives back to Westport on April 19th, 1838. He says, we're back home. That's it. It's over. Journal ends. The story is over. I was sad. I started to pace myself at the end as I was reading it. Next. So now he's back to the farm, and that must have been a cold greeting back. He mentions that he never wrote a letter home to his father or mother. He did write to his fiancée and some friends, and he received letters from his fiancée and friends. He never got a letter from Dad, so there's a little cold breeze coming from home. But at this point, this is the 1850 census, and his mother has passed away by then. She was there when he first got home. But he's living, his uncle is still living in the house. Now it's Frederick, his wife Hannah, Brownell, and two of their children, and Elizabeth Brownell. I don't know the relationship, probably some relative of his wife's, as a guess. Next. Well, the Brownells were visited often by Frederick Allen, especially on nights where they would go over, and all the kids, and these are the teenagers, 20-year-olds, in their dating process. And one of the entries I remember is him getting in a bit of a tussle with A. Brownell, initial A. And I was thinking, this is the older brother of Hannah. And it's Alexander Brownell, as you can see in the top of the children section, if you can read that. Speculation, I was speaking to somebody else, they said, gee, I wonder, Frederick is 9 years older than Hannah. She was quite young at the time of the entry in the journal. I wonder if if her brother took offense and they got in a fight over, you're dating my young sister. My speculation, I do that a lot. Next. Interestingly, being a volunteer at the New Bedford Whaling Museum, I found that in the collection they had a wonderful sampler done by Hannah Crary Brownell when she was 9 years old. And it's really kind of an interesting piece of work, just as a curiosity. Frederick and Hannah and many of the other Allens are buried in Beech Grove Cemetery. And I couldn't help but think, they're over in the cemetery, no matter which way the house came, whether it was up 88 or Main Road, it drove by them in the graveyard, so it was to its new destination. I haven't yet seen any pictures of what Frederick looks like, but this is what his son looked like. Now, he's a big guy too, because as I found out later, he was 5'11" and a half, so a pretty good sized guy. So I thought maybe he looked a little bit like this. Next. Well, just recently, I was informed by the Robins, who live in town, on Cadman's Neck, that they live in a house that was built by the Allens. Now, we're not exactly sure whether it's Frederick, probably. I did know that he got into real estate. He was purchasing land, including some on the neck, but it could have been his son Cortez. And the interesting thing is the Seamen's Protection Papers. This is a copy that was in the house when the Robins got the house. The other document on the other side is a book. What this is about is, which I didn't know, is that Cortez Allen also went on a whaling voyage. And it was on the Amelia out of New Bedford in 1859, a 3-year voyage. But what he did is he kept the journal. It's a small-sized journal, probably 4 inches by 5 or 6 inches. But it was concentrating mostly on oil. So what he kept track of, he didn't keep a journal about what happened. He kept a journal that said, we got a blackfish, we got 4 gallons. We got a sperm whale, we got 20 gallons. I think what he's doing is he knows his lay, he knows how much money. He wants to be sure. He's going to keep track of it from his end to make sure he's getting his fair deal. It's a meticulous little journal that I just got to peek up tonight. Next. Well, it's been a long trip, but take a look at what we have now. This is the wonderful new setting of the, I'm not sure which goes first, the Allen/Milliken house. Milliken, formerly Allen House, but there it is in its new setting, oriented the exact same way, looking south. And next. You can't beat the view. As far as I understand, these are not the Milliken's cows, they're rental cows from the nearby. But it's really a beautiful setting and a wonderful job done on a house that was almost destroyed. And we should be very happy and congratulate everyone from the Allens and include the Millikens in that next. So I say, Frederick, thank you for writing. And thank you for giving us this story. Now, I might add that at this point, the journal is back where it came from, strangely enough, in the house of where it was written. So it's in the hands of the Milliken. A copy has been made, and a transcript is in the process with the Historical Society. And we have hopes, I think Tony has hopes, that somewhere down the road we'll be able to publish it. And this is really the tip of the iceberg. I mean, you've got to think, 60,000 words. And the interesting things that he mentions and the different landmarks are, I'm sure, of great interest to you people from Westport. Any questions that I can answer? Yes?
Did he inherit the house from his father?
His father died when he was perhaps 63. His mother lived into the early 1900s. I think, I don't know the answer to that, but my guess is no. There may have been he purchased some property from her, but I don't know. I would guess that maybe Cortez got it, or somebody else. Somebody else might be able to answer that. Okay. Yes.
It said that you purchased it from some antique dealer in Stone.
Mm-hmm.
Where did it first surface? Where did she go? There must be a history of how it all of a sudden became available.
I knew this person. Actually, I knew her husband in the advertising business. He was an advertising sales reps for a magazine that I dealt with. But they don't know. They don't have a record of it. They sold all their inventory. They retired from the business. And this was kind of just a little thing that was hanging around in the cupboard. So it was their daughter that actually listed it on eBay. So I don't know how it made its way to Stony.
It's amazing, another eBay find.
And yeah, and the interesting thing is it made it all the way back home. So
True it is. Great story.
next. Yes.
There are two other Allens in Westport that I can think of. There's two other, there's quite a few, but one of the houses that's very close to the end of the point is the Joseph Prudence Allen house. And then on the, I guess there is a Mariner, I think Timothy C. Allen, I may be wrong, lost at sea around 1852. Do you know if they were connected?
I don't,
It's
but
on that, you know.
I can tell you that in this journal, he mentions a number of relatives that he visits regularly, and he says where. He'll mention the name of a pond, and he went to visit Uncle Fred. He even talks about how he got there, that there was one winter when the river was frozen over so solid that he was able to skate down the river to get over to the pond nearer to the end, south towards the point. So there are a lot of relatives. Again, once this book is published, we'll be able to do a ton of research about his friends, his relatives, the neighbors, and what they did, and also things like where he would drop off the sheep on an island. I think it was Great Island or something. For it seemed like for the summer to graze and then pick them up. I don't know if this is a tradition, but yes.
Can we have a gathering some night like they used to do at the Milkins to see that?
Well, I'm not going to invite you for that. But what they would do, by the way, is they would share. They'd go to everybody's house. So they spent time, the kids would go to the Allen house, they'd go to the Cornells, the Brownells, and they would spend, it seemed like a way to control them, have some parents in charge. Yes. Yes.
Do you know of any other journals coming from, let's just say, the whaling time in Westport?
Oh, yes, there are.
Any of them?
There are certainly dozens of logbooks and journals. There's a large collection at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. You can actually find, you can search these online, but they have 2,400 whaling logbooks and journals. And I think there are a fair amount of them from Westport because there were a number of vessels. There were a couple of categories, the President, a full-size ship, and a number of smaller ones that the Corys ran, like the Cape Cory, the Briggs. They seem to specialize in the shorter voyages, but very often you could have a whaling voyage, a single voyage, and have 10 journals. It's like keeping a diary. It's keeping a record so that you can go home and remember what you did or tell your relatives what you did, especially the traumatic incidents where, you know, you're stove in by a whale, somebody gets killed, all sorts of things happen. Any other questions? Not? I thank you.
Okay.